necessary, shifts back to Houston. I'm sure all those fans in Philadelphia would have preferred things to be flipped last night. If we're going to split, let's take the baseball game. We got plenty more football games to win, although they do maintain their quest 50 years after the Dolphins for 17-0 perfection. And Peter, you look at that schedule, I know you got to take them one at a time, and any given Sunday or Monday or Thursday or Friday or Saturday or whenever they play the games now. But the Eagles' table is set. They got 8 in the bank, and they got 9 coming up that they're going to be favored in all of them except perhaps maybe at Dallas Week 16.
Well, Mike, here's what I thought when I looked at the schedule this morning, that it really depends on how much Nick Sirianni wants to go to be undefeated, because clearly you get to the last 2 weeks of the season, and if the Eagles have a 2-game lead going into the last 2 weeks of the season, they have nothing to play for except maybe the top seed. I mean, and that assumes that the Minnesota Vikings would not lose again before the last 2 weeks, which I think is probably a faulty assumption. So you remember, Mike, and I'm not saying that Nick Sirianni is from the Indianapolis Colts Dungy Polian tree, where they never really thought that much of entering playoffs with momentum. And so you have to wonder now, if you look at the last 2 weeks of the season, it could very well be that the New Orleans Saints could really need that to stay competitive in a bad NFC South. It could very well be that the New York Giants would need the Week 18 game to be a wild card team, or to stay in competition to be a wild card team. So those are the things you start to think about, not just looking at it and saying, well, who are the toughest games? And obviously Tennessee in Philadelphia, that'll be tough. And then the Saturday Christmas Eve game at Dallas, late afternoon window, is going to be a really tough game, obviously.
And shades of 2007, Peter, with the Giants being the last potential piece of the puzzle. We saw what they did against the Patriots in a game the Giants didn't need, if I recall correctly,
right.
And there's a chance that I don't. They didn't need that, but they decided to go out and give it their all, and they built confidence in that game that allowed them to believe they could beat the Patriots if they met again, and they did, and we know what happened there. So off go the Eagles to 8-0 for the first time in franchise history. 7-0 happened in 2004, and obviously this year. 8-0 had never happened again, or previously, as the case may be, for the Philadelphia Eagles. Who knows? Maybe it'll happen again as soon as next year. Also, Jalen Hurts back in his hometown of Houston. First time ever playing there as an NFL athlete, wins the game. It looked like it was going to not be as easy as the final score would indicate. It wasn't as easy as the final score would indicate, and the Texans came out and gave it their all. They scored on the opening drive to go up 7-0. It was 14-14 into the third quarter. It was a Davis Mills interception that really started to turn the tide toward the Philadelphia Eagles. And even then, once the Eagles went up, the Texans didn't lay down. It was a couple of touchdown drives wrapped around a Texans field goal that got it to the point where it felt like the Eagles were going to get done. Let's have a listen to the quarterback and the head coach from the Philadelphia team that won last night and got to 8-0 on the season.
I know it's special for the city of Philadelphia, and I mean I've been 8-0 before and lost the national championship, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, just take it day by day, you know what I'm saying? Take it day by day. We haven't accomplished anything yet, and it's just it's a day by day thing of us controlling the things we can, playing to our standard, and trying to grow every day. I think that's truly what it's about.
It's just the next one. At this particular point, being 8-0 is sweet, right? And it beats the alternative of being 7-1 or 6-2, right? And so we know that our goal wasn't to go 8-0. Our goal is to take one game at a time, and that's our goal. And so, is it good? Is it good to be able to have this long weekend instead of 8-0? Of course, but we know that we're going to get back to work on Monday and go attack this next game against Washington like we attacked this last game against Houston.
One thing that really stood out to me, and I'm fascinated by Jalen Hurts, his entire makeup, his upbringing, how being a coach's son has helped make him the leader he is, and how being the leader he is has trickled down to the rest of the team. And they have that mindset. All those cliches, which became cliches because they're true, he's the embodiment of it. He's the ultimate coach on the field. And they had a shot last night, Peter, of Jalen Hurts' mom and sister in the stands. Where's Dad? Dad's a high school football coach. He's got a game tomorrow night. He's getting ready for that game. That's the mindset. That's the attitude. And that's how Hurts and the Eagles are able to just take it one step at a time, one day at a time, one game at a time. And here we are at 8-0. And that they're not susceptible to trap games because of that mentality. There's some traps floating on that schedule. I saw at Indy. That's not going to be an easy one, but they lock in, they focus, and they never look past an opponent, and they do what they have to do to win the game. And they've done it 8 straight times so far this year.
Mike, you talk about his dad. This is my lingering memory from my, 12 to 15-minute conversation with Jalen Hurts about a month ago after they played the Jacksonville Jaguars. What really stood out to me after that game and talking to him was 2 things. Talking about the imprint that his father has left on him. Okay? When we were talking about it and I asked him about the influence of his dad, he called him Coach Hurts. Who doesn't call their dad? Jalen Hurts, he calls him Coach Hurts. But the other thing that was really interesting about that conversation, Nick Sirianni after that game had told me, okay, it's the Jacksonville Jaguars. And again, I'm not trying to demean any opponent. I'm not trying to make any value judgment on anything. But, earlier that week on Tuesday night, Nick Sirianni looks up. It's 9 o'clock on Tuesday. They're putting the finishing touch on the game plan. And who is in the building watching tape at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, the player's off day? It's Jalen Hurts. And look, the one thing you will never hear about Jalen Hurts from the people at Alabama after he ended up leaving to go to Oklahoma because he had gotten beaten out for the job, the one thing you'll never hear is slacker. He doesn't know how to do that. He doesn't know how to, dial it back. And so I think that really showed last night, especially they did have some adversity in that game, being tied early in the third quarter. And he did get strip sacked in that game. And so, but I don't think there's anything about his approach, even playing the worst team in the league. I don't think there's anything at all that you say, well, okay, we could have worked harder during the week. That just isn't the case. And I bet he will look at that play, Mike, 15 times if he hasn't already looked at it on the plane, or if he didn't already look at it on the plane on the way back. I can't fumble when I get sacked. I got to be more careful with the ball. And so to me, Mike, a week ago, I gave my midseason awards, and I put Jalen Hurts number 2 on my MVP ballot, if indeed there is such a thing after 8 weeks of a season. But the reason I did that is because of, and I mean, it's amazing to me that I would put anybody ahead of Patrick Mahomes, and I put Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts ahead of him. And of course, we could argue that till the cows come home. I wouldn't convince you, you wouldn't convince me. But I just think you look at Jalen Hurts, he is in the middle of everything good that team has done this season. And, when you're the quarterback of an 8-0 team and you're playing at a very high level, I think you deserve to be considered for the MVP, and he will be considered for the MVP if they keep it up.
There's a never-ending debate among those of us who do this for a living as to whether or not quarterback wins are a stat. They're not a real stat, but a great quarterback, a great leader can influence a team to win, to play better than it's capable of, to perform, to study, to work, and to have the right mindset. And I spoke to Hurts after the win over Pittsburgh just 5 days ago, 35-13. And he said, I usually don't talk about myself like this, but I'm sensing the transition where the rest of the team, and I'm paraphrasing and summarizing, but the rest of the team has my mindset. That's what leadership does. Coach Hurts taught that to Jalen Hurts, who's becoming Coach Hurts for the rest of his teammates, and that's what great quarterbacks do. That's that intangible that helps a quarterback cause his team to win, even if it isn't fair to put wins and losses on every quarterback. A great quarterback who's a great leader can elevate. We don't know what he said on the sidelines or in the locker room, but something snapped them out of their funk last night. They were in a funk. They were sleepwalking. They easily could have lost that game, and something caused them to rise up and move past it. Short week. Everybody's tired. Had to fly to Houston, right? It's not really our night. And they found a way to elevate. And when you have a guy who's got that mindset that has come from growing up in the household of a head coach, calling him Coach Hurts, as you said, that's the kind of thing that can make a difference on a night where it would be very easy to say, you know what, we'll be fine if we're 7-1.
Mike, I want to take this on a little bit of a 90-degree angle, but the one thing I really thought of about this game last night is I really thought of how valuable a person in the franchise Howie Roseman has been, the general manager of the Eagles. Now, I'll give you a little roundabout answer, but Howie Roseman basically, if you look at what happened when this game was 14-14, okay, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who Howie Roseman traded a 5 and a 6 for, got his 5th interception of the game off Davis Mills to stop a Houston drive that would have been, at that time, the go-ahead drive in the game. So C.J. Gardner-Johnson intercepts the ball. And Jalen Hurts, who Howie Roseman drafted 53rd overall, against what many people, media, people close to the team, other officials around the league and other, snide talkers who said, what are they doing? They got Carson Wentz. Why are they taking a quarterback in the 2nd round? To which Howie Roseman said, we need a better backup quarterback situation. We're not drafting this guy to replace Carson Wentz, but Carson Wentz has hurt a lot. We got to get a better backup quarterback situation. And look what's happened now. And that is not because the circumstances changed to what Howie Roseman thought would happen, but part of it was the fact that they had, in my opinion, a childish quarterback in Carson Wentz, who looked at that as a challenge to his hold on the starting job. It wasn't, but he turned it into that, and he made a big deal of it. And so look what's happened now. Jalen Hurts might be the MVP that 5 years ago Carson Wentz very well might have been if he doesn't get hurt in 2017. But anyway, the last thing I'll say is that, so what happens after C.J. Gardner-Johnson gets that interception? And then the next thing you see is that, that Jalen Hurts throws a touchdown pass to, and you see here, a bad throw, obviously, by Davis Mills. But then you see Jalen Hurts throw a touchdown pass, obviously, to A.J. Brown. It was a great throw, a great play design by Nick Sirianni to an all-alone A.J. Brown in the end zone. And A.J. Brown, obviously, on day one of the draft, Howie Roseman traded for him with Tennessee and signed him to a contract like maybe about 20 minutes before their pick was scheduled to be made in the first round. So anyway, I know this is a roundabout way, and it doesn't really have a lot to do with the game last night, but in many ways, it does have a lot to do with it, because Howie Roseman basically made that play happen with his acquisition of C.J. Gardner-Johnson and his quarterback, who he picked to be a backup, but look what happened, and throwing a touchdown pass to the wide receiver, still only 25 years old, by the way, A.J. Brown, and signed for the long term in Philadelphia. This general manager of the Philadelphia Eagles, Mike, has done a heck of a job.
Sims and I spent a lot of time this week, Peter, talking about the draft and develop habits of the Green Bay Packers in reacting to the fact that they didn't make a trade for a receiver or for anybody at the deadline. And it's been 30 years, from Juan Wolf to Ted Thompson to now Brian Gutekunst, to draft and develop, draft and develop, draft and develop. You can't build an elite team in today's NFL by focusing only on one tool for acquiring talent. You can't be so obsessed with those late-round draft picks that you're not willing to go out and get a guy who can help you sooner rather than later, who you don't have to develop, who isn't that lottery ticket that you scratch off and hope it's a winner, and you find out there are just as many losers as there are winners. That's the Jimmy Johnson mindset you and I discussed last week. Because they also have Javon Hargrave, a guy they didn't draft and develop, who had 3 sacks last night and has had 5 in the last 5 days because he had 2 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was incredibly disruptive in the middle last night for the Philadelphia Eagles as they were trying to put the clamps on the Texans. I mean, the Texans could run the ball. Dameon Pierce had 139 rushing yards. But sometimes you got to be able to throw the ball. And if Davis Mills is trying to carry around Javon Hargrave on his back, it's kind of hard to throw the ball.
Hey, look, the Javon Hargrave, pickup by the Eagles, at the time I remember saying, do they really need Javon Hargrave? But how many teams have multiple really big bodies like Javon Hargrave and Fletcher Cox who play interior? A lot of times they play on the interior, and they're really threatening pass rushers. So, look, it's about building depth on your team. And look, if you ask Howie Roseman this, he'll say they're basically acting on the gospel of Andy Reid. Number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. Take care of both lines. And look at what the Philadelphia Eagles have right now. They have a top 5 offensive line in the NFL. They have a top 5 defensive line in the NFL. And that is by design. And so that's one of the things that you say, you look at this team and nothing is forever. But this team is very well set, not only for this year, but the future also.
And Howie Roseman is feeling pretty good about where he is. There's a clip that's gone viral on social media. Apparently there was a fan in the stands that had a sign that said, "Howie, you're forgiven for the A.J. Brown trade." And it requires some very mild lip-reading skills, but Howie lets the person have it with a twinkle in his eye and a smile on his face. But he lets him have it in classic Philadelphia fashion with multiple F-bombs. So reminding the fan of the fact that they do have a Super Bowl trophy from 5 years ago. And that's the thing that just astounds me about the way Eagles fans reacted to finally winning a Super Bowl. They got worse, not better. And I mean worse in the best possible way that I can, but they want it more. They want it so much more fervently and zealously than they did before they won one in the first place. And you've almost completely rebuilt the team since 2017. And here they are with a team that is better than the team that we saw win the Super Bowl 5 years ago.
Hey, look, Mike, I mean, and you know this story very well. I know this story. You don't have to be a Philadelphia media person to know this story. But basically, when Chip Kelly ran this organization, Howie Roseman was banished. I mean, he wasn't fired or anything like that, but it's just his opinion was not valued highly in the organization at the time. And he talks very openly, or he did talk at one time. I don't know if he would, dwell on it now. But he talked very openly post Chip Kelly. Nothing, he's not been publicly, castigating Chip Kelly. But he talked about how he got to be a better general manager in that period of time. Remember the story about him meeting with some of the Premier League guys who were the architects of the really great teams? I think it was Manchester United, maybe. He had a session with, with whoever the manager or whatever they call him in the Premier League. And I think he used that time. He didn't use that time to sulk in another part of the building where he really day to day wasn't responsible for, the operation or the roster or anything like that. But what he did do was he used that time to better himself as a general manager. And whatever lessons he learned at the time, those lessons really have come home to roost to help the Philadelphia Eagles.
And he physically was removed from the football operation. He was in a different office.
Yeah.
He was away from everything that Chip Kelly was doing. And once that crashed and burned, he reemerged, put together a Super Bowl team. They won it with Doug Peterson. And now with Nick Sirianni, they are one of the best two teams in the NFL. The Bills would probably beat them if they played on a neutral site right now, but who knows? The Eagles, though,
probably, but you never know.
And the Eagles are carrying around that unblemished record of 8-0. I think that counts a lot for some. In my opinion, that's enough to put the Eagles at 1. I think you had the Bills at 1 because the Bills right now – because the problem with the Bills is that I don't think they get locked in for lesser opponents the way the Eagles do. The Bills would be locked in for the Eagles, and you would see the absolute best that the Bills had to bring if there's a hypothetical matchup
Mike,
or an actual matchup that's looming in February.
I don't, at this time of year, who cares, really, honestly. But the only reason I put the Bills number 1 and the Eagles 2 is because the Bills finally kind of slayed the dragon at the home of the dragon, at Arrowhead Stadium. And they slayed them by making big plays down the stretch of the game. They didn't back into that win, Josh Allen made his best throw of the season to win that game, throwing it right over a safety and right into the hands of a well-covered Dawson Knox. And so that's why I put them number 1. And Philadelphia just simply has not had a win like that at the home of a great team. And look, Philadelphia's had some very good wins. They handled Dallas when they played. But look, none of it matters on February, 12th, because everything will have shaken out by then. But I think those two teams right now are clearly 1 and 2 in the NFL.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.